reason to believe that the plane made a dramatic shift in path and that then something else happened that wound up leading to the plane going down. Are we comfortable with at least that as a theory?
Well, I mean, I think we're comfortable based on the radar data and what we're getting now, sort of the technical data points that the plane did make this turn. We know that from the radar track. I don't think we have confirmed by technical data or sort of, you know, a source that's willing to be named that they're confirming that the plane went down. Look, I think everything, it's the logical conclusion, but we ought to be clear about when we're drawing conclusions and when we're looking at facts. We don't have the facts yet that the plane went down. We expect that's what we're going to get, and that's what we're beginning to hear out of the investigation, but they haven't confirmed it yet.
Okay.
Richard Quest, so little facts. And I see you shaking your head. You want to jump in. Go ahead.
Only because Fran's right, so little facts. And on this core fact of did the plane make a turn, there are these radar pings, which is not a radar track. It just means something was trying to communicate.
Say, I'm here.
I'm here, I'm here. But we don't really know what they are. We know the Malaysians this morning did say they are still extending the search into the South China Sea. Now, that's on the eastern side of the search.
Not on the west.
Not on the western side. So, back to Fran's very important point, we don't have facts. And I think that at this point, we've got more information, we've got minor pieces of this jigsaw, but we are certainly a long way from seeing a picture from it.
One of the points of fascination is the idea of the timing of the turn-off of the transponder, the comms on board, the communication equipment on board. What do you make of that? Is this something that suggests deliberate action, or could it have been a natural function of a massive decompression event on the plane?
Well, I've been saying all along that I thought that because everything went out at once, that it was not, that it had to be intentional, that everything was turned off at once. But this new information about 14 minutes later would explain something to me about a mechanical failure. Because what would happen there is if a bus came offline, if something happened to turn the transponders off, then later other things were turned off 14 minutes later, that would tell me that there was some kind of control, some kind of failure that had to be reacted to. 14 minutes would give you time to transfer the bus power,
right,
to deploy the emergency RAM generator. Those kinds of things take a little time.
But how would you then explain no radio contact during that time?
Yeah, and that's, well, the fact is that if something happens dramatic in the cockpit, you don't have time to call anybody. You've got to deal with it. The first thing you do as a pilot is fly that airplane.
Right.
So that's what you have to do. Make sure.
Communicate.
That's right. Everything that you have has to be working properly to maintain flight of that aircraft. So that's the focus.
I want to talk to you, Richard, about we were talking in the office a little earlier about the idea that this plane, from one of the ways they're looking at it, is that was navigating via waypoint.
Right.
Now, that would argue that somebody who was an aviator was at the helm of the plane, or would it not?
Not a bit of it.
All right.
That merely means that the plane was flying a predetermined route.
Because it could be on autopilot.
It could have been on autopilot. It could have been by hand. In fact, it probably would have been on autopilot. If a plane is flying a carefully structured route, an interstate of the sky, through its various junctions, that would more likely suggest it was on some form of autopilot. But I don't know. This idea that it was flying a carefully controlled path, a waypoint path, and the way they're doing it is, they've looked at or they're starting to look at the route from these pings, and they've put it, they've overlaid it with a map, basically, and they've said, oh, well, actually, that looks like that's a waypoint to there, that's a waypoint to there, that's a waypoint to there. This thing is flying a track.
I got to say, you three may be the experts, but the most helpful thing I've heard so far is Mickey saying, aviate, navigate, communicate. If that is the protocol for people in the air, it may well explain why we didn't hear these radio transmissions that are so frustrating. Here's my big question that I'd like to hear you three weigh in on. We keep talking about why this would have happened, a major decompressive event, which means something happened on board the plane that just knocked out the people, God forbid, and then made it still able to fly. What do we know, Fran, about what was in the belly of that ship?
Cargo.
The manifest of cargo, and whether or not Malaysian Airlines is known for taking care of noxious or hazardous materials the right way.
Well, you know, Chris, this has been a controversy since post 9/11. There's always been concerns around the world about in the belly of passenger planes, the fidelity one has about the cargo and the screening that it goes through. Of course, since 9/11, we've done a lot here in the United States to address those concerns. But it's not clear, frankly, and there's been very little information, not only about the cargo, but about the investigation separate and apart from the search. We focus rightly right now on the search because of the importance of finding the plane and the data recorder. But there are other things going on. It's the investigative steps and material related to all the passengers, the pilots, the cargo. There's a lot of information that investigators will be looking at right now with the help of their American allies and intelligence services around the world. And those are the sorts of things that the Malaysians are not talking about publicly, either to dismiss concerns like the cargo or to address them publicly. And I think that's also a very frustrating point for folks.
Well, and that seems to be the word, David, that we are using so much, is the frustration in the absence of this information that everybody so desperately wants.
Yeah, there's a lot of information going on behind the scenes, and they're obligated to keep that within the team because you don't want to get distracted by a bunch of other information. But this point about the weight and balance or about in-flight decompression, in 1989, a 747, it would have to be a massive decompression to disable the aircraft and the electrical system to the point where the aircraft wouldn't be able to fly. In 1989, a 747, Flight 811, United 811, the cargo door came off. The side of a 747 is huge, and that aircraft was able to land and
there's so many redundancies on board these jetliners.
Triple redundancy.
Right. I'm just going to jump in here because all these scenarios, your decompression, your cargo door, all these different scenarios are possible, some may even be probable. But they don't explain, of course, why none of the electronic systems. Right. This was a very modern airliner that was able to send out a distress signal via the ACARS system automatically.
And we haven't.
And we haven't got those ACARS warnings.
And that's my point about the door.
Absolutely.
Is the decompression theory doesn't carry weight with me, nor does the weight and balance shift, which we were going to talk about.
Well, here's what we know. Something happened, right? And there were 239 souls on board, their families and loved ones who were waiting for answers. So that's why the search has to continue. This panel is very valuable. We're going to keep them here with Michaela and I and get more answers to the questions that are out there about what happened to Flight 370. But there is other news this morning, so let's get you to John Berman with a look at that. John.
All right, thanks, Chris. A large Russian troop buildup underway.
And we've been watching analysis and discussion about missing